you. I am very, very pleased to introduce you to our speaker for this evening. Dr. Ceren Budak is an associate professor at the University of Michigan School of Information. And as a leading computational social scientist, Dr. Budak's research is at the intersection of AI, machine learning, and online information ecosystems, which means that she has published widely on many topics that I think have direct relevance to current events, and done so in prestigious journals like Nature and in the popular press like the Washington Post. Her work on how the 2016 US presidential election was shaped by the media continues to be relevant as we approach what seems to become another very heated cycle. And she's also examined the effects of social media on vaccine behavior during the pandemic. Her numerous publications on misinformation and social media feel particularly timely in an era when the information landscape seems increasingly fractured and misinformation is talked about everywhere. So, what I really appreciate about today's talk, though, is that her work isn't just concerned with assessing challenges brought by technology and digital media, but also what AI can do to help preserve civic discourse and ensure that a variety of voices are heard, and to help individuals connect and to increase our empathy for each other. So I'm very much looking forward to today's talk about hearing how we can use these advanced tools to improve issues in society today. And with that, I would like all of us to give a warm welcome to Dr. Budak. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, that was a very, very kind introduction. Okay, so let's get going. We'll now get going. Today's talk is on pro-social design with pluralistic and narrative AI systems. And this is going to be two example studies from my lab that are looking into the use of generative AI for pro-social purposes. So I'll start with the definition. What do I mean by pro-social? Pro-social design is the set of design patterns, features, processes which foster healthy interactions between individuals and which create conditions for those interactions to thrive by ensuring individual safety, well-being, and dignity. So this is sort of the definition that was come up with 400 plus researchers that are sort of in this pro-social design space. So this means that any kind of technology platform that is embedded in our society, so these are socio-technical systems, have implications for pro-sociality, right? So if we have systems that are either mediating our conversations directly with each other, or they are providing information to us that's impacting the way that we interact with each other, they can be either built pro-socially or otherwise, right? So a lot of my work is looking into how existing systems are pro-social or not, but also building systems with these ideals in mind. So I have some past work that's looking at social media systems. So those are the ones that are mediating our conversations. So the kinds of decisions that they're making are mostly about, given a universe of information that's available that can be presented to you, how should there be selection, ranking of that information to decide what can be shown to each individual. Obviously, the past few years have brought this prevalence of generative AI systems that's impossible to ignore them. So the last few years, I have been thinking about that space as well. In that case, we're thinking less about, given a universe of information, how should ranking be done, but these are systems that are producing information. So it's given maybe a request, a prompt from a user, what is the kind of information that should be produced and shared with the user. So these ideals of pro-social design seem pretty sort of ambitious, abstract, and there are various dimensions to them. So today's talk is going to be focused on sort of one particular challenge that's looked through two different projects and two different lenses. And that is the fact that these systems especially these generalist, very popular systems that a lot of us use on a daily basis are, in these spaces where they are, interacting with individuals that are really diverse in their identities and goals and so forth, right? So here I'm just obviously, trying to show it as almost like a binary of red and blues that might indicate to you that I'm signaling ideology, which a lot of my work is about indeed. But it can be a lot more complicated than, right? We have a lot of sort of intersecting identities, goals, and in our society. So what does that mean? That can be that if the platforms are not designed properly, they can lead to more conflict, they can lead to isolation, and so on and so forth. So today's talk, as I said before, is on a generative AI and is trying to take this sort of positive perspective. That is like, how can we build these systems with these pro-social ideals in a way that we can be bridging different communities, getting people to think through experiences that they otherwise would not, through the use of these technological systems. So that's sort of the high-level idea. And as I said, there are two studies I'm going to be going through. The first one is already published, and second one is ongoing and is actually supported by Midas. So thanks to Midas for the support on this project. So I'll start with the first one, which is on building multi-agent pluralistic AI informed by deliberative democracy. And I'll start with a sort of high-level challenge that I've already alluded to some degree. That is that there is a fundamental tension in these systems that are being built and that we are using, in that we're generally using a small number of generalist models, but they're being used by a diverse set of users with different backgrounds and goals, right? So go back to the sort of image that I was showing you before. This invariably leads to, and in this case indeed has led to, concerns about bias, right? So that these systems might be reflecting one viewpoint better than the other, and this basically introduces a particular challenge here. So one goal here might be maybe to aim for neutrality, right? So we're going to find this generative AI system that's going to be, if you're thinking just ideology, purple, right? But obviously that's easier said than done. Why? Because defining and measuring bias is notoriously hard, and it's in the eye of the beholder, if you will. So what you see as purple, I might not see as purple, there are really great efforts here. There are various really exciting benchmarks that folks are building to try to test the bias of these systems. But they're limited, and these benchmarks are particularly limited for open-ended text, which is what these generative AI systems are producing. By the way, I'm mostly focused on text in my work, so that's what's reflected here in this presentation. But you can imagine that it applies very easily to images and videos as well. So the question is, what should we be doing next? So that was the motivating question behind this study of ours, and we had very sort of motivating examples that get us started. So I'll give you some of these examples. I myself am quite interested in housing justice. So imagine you have a housing justice group that aims to identify the most effective messaging for a homeless shelter proposal. Ideally, you have unlimited resources. You can talk to various communities. Some of them might be driven by sort of fairness and providing housing for families, and some of them might be motivated by worries about security, and some folks might be worried about, let's say, the monetary costs of building such a shelter. So that sort of typically we know how to deal with this when we're working with humans. Another example might be maybe you have a CEO who seeks to determine which aspects of a policy memo will raise concerns for employees. And again, employees are varied. They might have all kinds of different things that they have in mind. Some of them have maybe timing constraints, money, benefits, and so forth. So LLMs, given that they are sort of engines of text generation, could be, in theory, be used to try to get some insights for both of these tasks, right? You can, simply ask ChatGPT, if you will, for both of these questions and try to get some insights. But the question is, which viewpoint should these models reflect? We have employees and residents have various different perspectives, and therefore any standard single model approach is going to be unlikely to represent diverse viewpoints. So that's sort of the motivating sort of set of examples behind this work. So instead of aiming for the single model that has this view from nowhere, our goal was to build a system of LLMs engaged in controlled deliberation, simulating different viewpoints. So in this case, maybe in the housing justice advocate setup, it might be a network of simulated residents of a particular town with its own unique composition. And then you might see the advocate can simulate how the residents in the town might engage in a debate, and we can identify messages that will resonate in that particular setting. To help with such cases, we built Plurals. So here we basically have a team of agents, if you will, with a different background and viewpoint, and you can use simple Python coding to structure how these agents talk to each other. The one aspect of this project that I'm really excited about is that we're generally aiming for open source toolkits that other people can utilize so that we can enable future research. So the Plurals was one such project. So the goal is it's a tool for pluralistic multi-agent interactions modeled after deliberative democracy. So this is where my sort of past readings from deliberative democracy sort of came in handy. Okay, so what is the system doing? Again, the status quo is that you have an LLM, let's say you go to chatgpt.com and you ask a question, you get an output, and you use this. So indeed, I, just to humor myself and you, I did try this with ChatGPT, right? So I'm a housing justice group member. I want to identify the most effective messaging for a homeless shelter proposal. Please give me one good example. Unclear why there's a question there. So the answer at first was, I'm sorry, I can't help with that request. And then I asked why, and then it's like, never mind, I can't help with that request. And then you look at this answer, and it's like, it's quite unsatisfying. It seems like very generic of like sort of, I mean, it has some good ideas in there, but it's just sort of the feeling that I got from that was that it was quite generic. So what is the alternative? Alternative that we're building here. Plural system has agents that represent people. Agents have different characteristics, demographic characteristics, as well as instructions as to how to approach a task. They are put in structures, so that dictates how agents talk to each other. And this is basically dictating how information is shared in this ecosystem. And combination instructions are telling agents how to process the information that's presented to them at each sort of step in this deliberation process. And now we have moderators that summarize the communication to provide the information at the very end. So that's sort of the high-level summary of the system, and that gives us the output. I won't go into too many details of our system, but we had some guiding principles that we were working with. One of them was that pluralism is generally sort of operationalized as basically, having diversity in the set of people involved, and in the case of generative AI, a set of agents involved in the production of the information or text. In our case, we were mainly driven by interactional pluralism, which is the pluralism in the rules of engagement, and not this first-order characteristic, or at least on top of that first-order characteristic, right? So you can create a diverse set of agents, And on top of that, you can have this. You can put them in structures in ways such that diverse agents are talking to those that are sort of maybe, let's say, an out-group member. We're, as I said, driven by deliberative democracy ideals, and our abstractions that I just mentioned map to phases in deliberation. So, according to Rife, for instance, first you need to have an organization of how people are embedded in the system. So these are driven by structures. You have the sort of rules of deliberation that we give to agents, and you have the sort of final product that comes out of deliberation that's produced by our moderators. And we included various templates in this open source system that are various different templates that are driven by different ideals that are enumerated under deliberative democracy, as well as other templates that might be useful outside of political deliberation. And finally, another principle that we're driven by was modularity. The full sort of, plural system might be an overkill for some of your projects, right? So you might not need a moderator. You might not need a fancy structure to put agents in. So the idea is that the system is highly modular, so that you can have agents that are deployed in different structures, or agents can be used outside those structures. You can have moderators or not. So it's quite easy for a user of this Python library to be able to structure the use of plurals that fit their goal. Again, a bit more on these system details. So we have agents. Agents have system instructions and tasks that have two components. One of them sort of defines what kinds of demographic attributes they should be reflecting. So, for instance, we can use ANES data integration that we have to quickly generate a set of nationally representative agents. And we also have pre-populated templates for different types of personas, and again, templates that tell agents how they should be processing information. They're put in structures. Here I'm giving you one example structure. This is a chain structure where each agent has access to the output of the agent before it. So that this would sort of give you a chain in this particular case. But as I said, we have various different structures that we can use. And then users can define these combination instructions for agents to use existing templates as well. And finally, the moderators can play. They can both be summarizing information, as well as we use them to build guardrails into the system. So moderators can reject tasks if they are identified to be or predicted to be harmful as well. What are the kinds of structures that are enabled under our system? We have chain, as I mentioned, and the chain can sort of repeat an arbitrary number of times. We have a debate structure where two agents can be debating. We have an ensemble where agents are not talking to each other, but all producing independently their output, which might be summarized by a moderator later on. And now we have arbitrary graph structures that you can define to put agents in, and you can make those graph structures be reflective of maybe how let's say a particular society is structured, so that the output might be sort of more reflective of what would come out of that particular society. So in terms of the, a few examples here, again, imagine that you want to simulate a nationally representative sample of the US population. So you can use this ANES integration, the American National Election Studies integration, with like a few lines of code to basically produce such a system. Or you want to maybe simulate how a conversation would unfold under different norms of deliberation. So deliberative democracy has a sort of long history. Maybe you want to have you want to see what would happen under first generation deliberative democracy ideals that are sort of more grounded in logic and rationality, or a second generation deliberative democracy ideas that are giving more weight to individual experiences. So those, again, we have well-tested templates that we put in there for you to be able to easily use these structures. And as I said, structures can be arbitrarily complex. So imagine that you have a case where you want to put higher weight on certain voices. Maybe you're trying to create a memo that are particularly affecting women in a particular workplace. So you can just simply create a large number of women agents. But you can also create a structure such that all information is sort of starting from the, let's say, a woman agent producing some text, which is fed to HR, PR, and a particular other employee. All of this sort of is feeding through. So this basically would be such that that information is used by all agents in the system, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. So this is where this interactional pluralism as a design principle comes into play. So we had various different experiments in this work. We first looked at what we call mechanistic fidelity, which is that is the system doing what we think it's doing. I'm not going to focus on those experiments. I'm going to focus on efficacy experiments here. So we tested plurals with 3 case studies, and we wanted our case studies to be, evaluating both how plurals would work on conservatives and liberals, and we wanted to choose polarized domains where individual preferences might be more nuanced than political ideology alone. So those were the guiding principles for the 3 case studies that we have chosen. The goal at the high level for these experiments is to create output that a target audience, and here again, you as the user of the system would define that, would find compelling. How do we create this output, the text? So we have the plural system. In the plural system, to be completely frank, I think we only scratched the surface in terms of the kinds of experiments we could be running. So we only tested one structure. We tested, in this case, ensembles, so individuals that are sort of independently producing content that is summarized by moderators at the end. These agents were generated using the American National Election Studies data, so they're supposed to be nationally representative of the US population. And they were giving instructions that were aligned with each case that I will briefly mention. So that's what we are. That's our system. What's the baseline? The baseline is sort of practically what I did with what I was showing you guys with this ChatGPT, right? So instructing a vanilla ChatGPT, what I'm calling. So if you know Zero Shot, this is basically where you have generative AI systems produce text without any sort of training examples. And Zero Shot with chain of thought, which is a strategy that's found to be useful, which is that you ask basically the model to explain its reasoning. So that tends to make them sort of more accurate. So we compared our system to these. The evaluation, we recruited sample of real members of target audience using Prolific, which is a crowdsourcing platform. So we recruited, in the case we're looking for content that would be compelling to liberals, we're recruiting liberals. When it's in the case of conservatives, we're recruiting conservatives. And we give them 2 outputs, one of them coming from plurals, the other one from the baseline, randomized order, and we ask them what they prefer. So that's the sort of the experimental design at a very, very high level. I was told that's sort of produced for a general audience. So hopefully that's clear. Okay. So we have, as I said, 3 experiments, one of them with conservatives, 2 of them with liberals. And again, in a way that we expect that things might be a little bit challenging to get people to sort of like a piece of content for that particular domain. So we had these 3. So if you focus on, let's say, the first one, conservatives, the domain was basically producing sort of a solar panel company advertisement that would make them want to buy solar panels. Again, as I said, we have this plural system and the non-plural system. And we're looking at, on the y-axis, a proportion of the time that the actual conservatives picked the plural answer as opposed to the non-plural answer. So you can see that across all of these examples, to a varying degree, however, the plurals does better than the sort of baseline approach of using a generalist model that is trying to produce content that it would think would be compelling to a conservative. Yeah.
So you give them a pair of texts.
Yes.
And one of them is generated by the vanilla, the zero
Yeah.
shot, and the other one by plural.
Yes. Zero shot with chain of thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you ask, so the outcome variable is which one you
prefer. Yeah, so it still doesn't, I think this is, that's why I mean, like, this is like start of it. Like, it says that they prefer. Does it mean that they would eventually buy? Is a separate question that is not answered in this study. Yeah. Other questions? Okay. And so basically, a high-level summary is that Plural significantly outperforms baseline of using typical single-agent solution across all 3 cases. But as I said, this is only, like, there are various, compared to a vanilla LLM. Does that mean do we need LLMs? Maybe a messaging from a human, sort of text would be more compelling, right? So we're not testing for that here. There's just more, I would say, more to be done. But in cases where you need to do things at scale is where you really have these sort of generative AI systems come into play, and that's where we find the value, and that's why we do this comparison to this sort of vanilla ChatGPT version, if you will. Okay. All of my talks are, then I have to say, like, why this study might be limited and why are there ethical concerns. So that comes with my talks all the time, so it's going to be no exception here. So one, we had positive pro-social ideals that were driving our sort of building of the system, but we have a dual-use phenomena, which is that if a system is built to persuade, it can be used to persuade for other purposes, right? So that's an important challenge to keep in mind. Again, as I said, we have guardrails in the system such that we're using taxonomies of algorithmic harms and rejecting tasks according to such harms when they're found to be significant. Still, that might not be capturing everything. Concerns around misrepresentation and representational harms of personas. So we're not really at the end interested in the output of the system, as opposed to if the agents are realistic, right? But still, they're producing content, and there can be misrepresentation and representational harms associated with that if people are sort of trying to associate them with human output. And again, while our goal is not to replace humans by in any means, I actually think that these are sort of complementary approaches, and these systems can not ever replace humans. There is risk that the systems can be perceived that way and can be used that way if you're in cases where you need to ask people, that you still try to find this sort of shortcut. And LLMs reflect the data that they're trained on. So if there is bias in the training data, it may be unclear ex ante. So before you run the experiment and you evaluate how well the system does, you don't know how well the system does. So we showed you the results for 3 settings, but we know that these systems are weird. They reflect, US and Western Europe a lot better than, let's say, other countries. So if you're trying to reflect some other demographic group, other culture, they might do poorly. We actually have some other studies where we show that these systems are really quite bad at internalizing deep values that people hold. So important to keep in mind. And there are limits to our abilities to steer LLMs. So we have all kinds of instructions to get them to act in a certain way, but that still doesn't guarantee that they will act in that way. So that's one challenge. Another challenge is hallucinations. So some of those can be, in some degree, addressed by using some newer approaches, retrieval augmented generation, which can more ground the LLM answers, or more likely to ground LLM answers in reality. But hallucinations still do occur, so that's important to keep in mind. Well, in terms of our high-level contributions, some of those were this threefold. The first one is theoretical. So we built this multi-agent system that incorporates ideals of deliberative democracy theory in it. So there's a number of studies that predate ours that look at pluralism in AI, but we were sort of bringing this political communication lens into this sort of line of work. And unlike past work, we introduced interactional pluralism as a design principle in generative AI systems. Systems level, the past few years especially, I'm more and more passionate about enabling other work than doing my work. So I'm really fully in for open source systems that others can utilize. So our system has really extensive documentation and tutorials for people to use it, and already seeing, luckily, a lot of great scholars in our field that are using our system to sort of build basically a Gen AI system of a multi-agent system with our Plurals package. So that's great to see. Empirically, we did show some mechanistic fidelity, which I didn't go through, some efficacy, which I did go through, and then showed that the simulated focus groups yield content that is sort of more compelling to both liberals and conservatives for cross-cutting issues. And frankly, I will say that's one of the reasons why we see this. I didn't go into this too much, but when you tell these Gen AI systems, you're a liberal or write something for liberals, they go into deep, stereotyping mode, and so it's highly simplistic. So versus the ANES agents that we're producing they have multiple identities. They're from Texas and liberal, or they're from California and they're conservative, and so those kinds of things I feel like lead to some of these more nuanced texts that actually speaks to real humans. And then we show that, this third one I didn't go through, but we showed that plurals can be used as programmable environment for creating guardrails for, again, rejecting tasks that are going to be harmful. In our case, we're looking for psychological and environmental harms. So that's the first study. I'm sorry, folks, I'm also very low energy. I'm just going through a little bit of food poisoning, so this is I'm just barely standing, so I'm sorry for the low energy. But I am, oh yes?
Well, I was curious, so years back, in a condo where there's a homeless shelter proposal right next door, we actually got to see firsthand what the back and forth around that. One of the things that cropped up was a surprising amount of misinformation that was being used to argue both for and against the
Yeah.
Is misinformation something that you include as part of these mechanisms, or is it one of the harms that moderators
Yeah, that is a great question. So this is the system, the original system that we built that is tested here, does not include any so we have these RAG systems, retrieval augmented generation systems, where these agents can be producing. All they're doing is producing text, right? They're not producing actual information. So the text itself can include misinformation. So especially for a context for which it doesn't have enough training data, that can really happen. So you can build into these systems RAG systems so that it actually produces text that is coming from a particular context. Those kinds of things can reduce the amount of misinformation that we see in them. So I will say that I looked at a lot of the sort of outputs of this homeless shelter example, because I also myself was quite intrinsically motivated for this task. And we did not do this check. We did not look at for each piece of information or text that is generated if it includes misinformation or not. That would be a great test. I didn't see, it sort of passes the smell test. I will say that I didn't see any sort of big flags. It was more like, really some security concerns, but there is also on the positive side how it can be sort of leading to, people's better outcomes for homeless families and so on and so forth. So I haven't seen that, but it's possible. It's absolutely possible. And it's possible that there are certain contexts for which there is not enough data in the training data, and the LLM systems are going to be more likely to hallucinate. That would be another, given that this is an open source system, it would be another one that we or others can sort of contribute to the system to add additional guardrails there. Great question. Yeah, thank you. Other question? Yeah.
I just have a question about the comparison to the vanilla ChatGPT. So my own lay use, the prompt itself can make a big difference in the outcome, and I wonder how you can control for that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we did some preliminary sort of tests to try to come up with the sort of best, best prompt in terms of being able to produce good. We had some early tests, like some with a smaller group of prolific users. So we tested some of these, but it's absolutely, you're absolutely correct. And this is a criticism that you commonly get in this space for, you just needed a better prompt. So we tried different kinds of prompts, but you're right that there might be another prompt that would perform better than the prompt that we have used here.
But you did check the prompt first with the prolific, conservative, real people.
It is. I mean, it's small cell. So we did it's not this. Again, I think this was more like best effort in trying to come up with a good prompt, but it's not. It is absolutely correct that it could be a better prompt that can lead to better answers. Yeah.
I have a question about prolific. So a lot of people.
Oh yeah. And I don't know. Was I supposed to break? Is it okay to break now before the second study? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I have a question about prolific. So a lot of users in prolific actually end up using AI to respond to questions in prolific.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are AI bots, I think, as well, who are users. Was there a way that you checked for whether people were using AI to respond and if the users were actually people?
Yeah, I mean, so bots, we're sort of using some, I need to think back to this project. It's been a while since we ran this. So I don't remember exactly when we're running what were exactly in our surveys. So we try to put questions in our surveys to filter out bots. Did we do this in this case? I don't remember. But in terms of using AI in this case, I would suspect that trying to use generative AI is actually more costly in this case than just answering, because all we're doing is we're giving them two pieces of text and saying choose whichever one you prefer. All right, so I would say that in that case, just randomly selecting is a better alternative than trying to use generative AI. But it is true that for tasks in general, that is a big challenge. I would suspect in this case probably not as big. Yeah.
Hey, thanks for the first part of your talk. I was curious about like the content of the deliberation, and I'm wondering if you observed in like the conversations that the agents were having, like any sort of like understanding of the other side's interests, such that they were able to get to like maybe creative win-win solutions for both sides, rather than maybe just only finding compromises between the initial positions.
Yeah, it is. It's funny. So we actually have different templates that are vary in terms of how, like, yes and, or like. So this is a thing that we tried quite a lot with debates, and these systems can be also pretty sensitive to the instructions that you give it. So sometimes they overdo it when you say, for instance, like acknowledge. So, for instance, like it's in one of the templates I think we had, like acknowledge the positives and the negatives of the sort of first point, and then give your point afterwards. So then you kind of see a lot of it almost like can look cookie cutter like. So they do acknowledge. So I do think that, I mean, part of the reason why I think we see this preference is that they do some of that. Do they do that to the degree that like when I look at the output, it's like overly polite, and but yes, I acknowledge what you said, but the nice thing is, again, then you have the moderator that can be sort of capturing all of this back and forths in a way that can aggregate all of the text. But you can really steer them to deeply engage with the response that they receive that they're supposed to respond to. Yeah.
I kind of have a question regarding the toolkits. Is there a way to like keep them up to date or remove bias by maybe like aggregating online opinion or opinion pieces, or is it more just created by one person to represent like a certain group?
Sorry, you mean who are the...
Like when someone makes like a toolkit, for example, to represent a certain interest group, do they do that by maybe like aggregating data from opinion pieces or online sentiment, or like how do they create those
So you can
toolkits?
So our toolkit is a Python package, basically, right? So you can, right now, in terms of our contributors, it is only our students. But if people, it's an open source project, so presumably if you want to contribute and sort of have enough, programming experience, you could become one of the contributors, and then you can, add some of these sort of added logic to it, but you can also, basically do a pull request, get the package, and then make edits on your end to be able to incorporate some of these things. So we try to cover as many templates, both in terms of what the agents are, but how they should interact with each other as much as we could. But it doesn't cover everything. So if you wanted to add something else, that is maybe you want your agents to have access to opinion pieces, then these are the kinds of things you can absolutely add to the toolkit itself.
So sorry to add on, just quickly, would that kind of function almost like skills, where you set up like a text document representing these people with added information that you could easily add, or? So
this actually, it very easily can go into the agent instructions, because agent instructions is the information that they have access to before they start the deliberation. Okay. So this is why also we were informed by the sort of deliberative democracy idea that like people first read pieces of text and they come together, then they debate, and we look at the output. So that would be in the agent. You can embed this in the agent instruction in a way that each agent reads the same set of sort of documents, or maybe you have them read different set of documents and see what happens as a result. So that can be very easily incorporated to the system. Yeah. Okay, maybe I'll take one more and then we'll go into the next one, and we can still have some conversations about this after that one.
So I think you touched on this. So it sounds like the agents have a point of view from, I assume, the RAG, or that they're using to deliberate from a perspective.
So we definitely did not have RAG when we ran this.
Okay.
This is more like they have information. I mean, RAG in the sense that they have these instructions. So that's the context that they have.
But is it fair to say that that's static? So if they're in a deliberation, can that evolve over time so that the agents actually influence the way that they then subsequently deliberate?
I can't see why that wouldn't be a good idea. It's not. I don't think it's implemented in the system yet. So I think that's where that's why I believe in these open source systems, where like people might have different things they're looking for from a system, and then you can make it such that, like, technically it's going to be absolutely feasible to update our package to do this, but I think it currently
But you're not
in
interested in the evolving nature of how their
information.
Their
Yeah, I mean, theoretically I'm interested, but in this project, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Now I'll present another project, and that one is now focused on using generative AI, basically autocomplete with generative AI to perform narrative transportation at scale. So the motivating sort of thought here is, again, similar to what I was saying before, that it's like these systems are embedded in, or we are embedded in these diverse systems where people have different identities, different experiences, and your life experiences powerfully shape your attitudes, behaviors, and your policy report. Yet individuals, we only have one life, and therefore we have limited experiences, and that limits, the attitudes you might have towards others, the policy you might have, policy support you might have for certain things that might actually benefit other members of the society. So traditional approaches to bridge this gap include educational interventions. So basically, telling someone how somebody else's experience might be maybe less positive than yours, for instance, or perspective taking exercises. But these can backfire, especially if they are found to be too prescriptive or didactic, right? So it's that people might have a negative reaction to some of these interventions. So here, narrative stories can offer a promising alternative by transporting readers into different realities and by therefore reducing their psychological distance to these other life experiences. So this is a very exciting sort of scholarship that is focused on narrative transportation in psychology, and that was the motivating sort of factor for our work here. The challenge with using narrative transportation is that you can have stories, but you want the stories to be compelling. And for the stories to be compelling, you probably want them to be personalized, something that actually will speak to you so that you will actually get transported and deeply engage with that story. But doing that, creating these personalized narratives is resource intensive, right? So you can't really be producing one story per person to be able to get them to sort of change, let's say, attitudes and behaviors. So this is where these recent advances in LLMs present a new opportunity that we wanted to build on. So in terms of the theories that sort of grounded our work here, these are going to be more coming from psychology in this work. So the first one, as I mentioned, is narrative transportation theory that says that immersing yourself in a story can create these vivid mental imageries and then can increase emotional engagement. Especially if they are sort of really relatable stories that would have reduced resistance because there are fewer counter arguments, and they're been used successfully in past work for increasing persuasion and sometimes behaviors as well. Related to this is work on mental simulation, and the idea here is that if you can get people to sort of be in a mentally simulating sort of state, especially through process as opposed to the outcome, that can again lead to sort of a boost of sort of attention in that story, and can again lead to sort of better sort of attitudinal change and persuasion as well. So we were inspired by this as like the process simulation is exactly the sort of writing of the story, engaging in the story as opposed to just the outcome. And finally, third theory that is relevant to our work is this theory about imagined contact theory. So this is a subset of sort of work in contact theory that says that if you are, if you have contact with an out-group member, a person perhaps you don't have as high opinions about, that contact can improve your idea of them, right? The challenge with contact theory is that it's really hard to create the conditions to get people to have contact with the perfect out-group member, right? So that's why a lot of scholarship focuses on imagined contact theory. So that is basically creating these imagined positive interactions with out-group members can improve attitudes and reduce prejudice. So these were the ideas that are sort of underneath this work that I'm going to be presenting at the high level. The as-if machine, a multi-agent AI system that draws on narrative transportation theory, mental simulations, and imagined contact hypothesis. The goal is to make, so a system that can serve various different goals. You can use it to make distant risks, unfamiliar experiences, or invisible benefits vivid and personally meaningful to a person. And that hopefully can lead to positive attitude and behavioral change. So the as-if machine consists of 4 specialized agents that decompose this narrative generation process. So the first part generates a scenario onset based on user inputs. So this is where we are personalizing the story. And the second agent is, each step is trying to forecast scenario effects. A third agent is making sure that there is some cohesiveness to the narrative arc. And the fourth agent is responsible for facilitating interactive co-writing with the user. And much like Plurals, we are aiming for AIM, the as-if machine, to also be a public project to enable future work here as well. So again, high level, we have the user. User goes to our system in the experiment right now. So in the real world setting, you might be getting user information in different ways. But in our experiments, we take them through an intake form, get some information about them, about their demographics, about their life experiences. And then based on this, we go to this initializer agent that generates how the event would start. So this is basically a system where you can get people to write any kind of story, but we are getting people to write stories for a day in their lives and for a particular scenario. So we initialize. The predictor is again trying to predict for a given set of piece of text what would be the effect, because we're trying to sort of optimize for these effects. And the writer writes specific narrative given the effects and an onset, keeping in this sort of narrative arc in mind, or not mind. They don't have minds, but you know what I'm saying. And then basically a user writes about a day in their life as if they experienced the event, and the autocomplete at each step as you're writing, when you pause, gives you suggestions. So you can reject that suggestion, or you can accept it, and you can write on top of that. Right? So that's where we have giving the user agency, but also ideas to help them generate ideas and hopefully steer them towards sort of stories that we expect to have positive outcomes. We are planning to test this across 4 different, well, at least 3 different case studies. But so far, we have results only from one of them, which is what I'm going to be presenting. And it's actually ongoing. We're doing it in batches. So this is based on the first 2 batches where we have 500 people involved in the experiment so far. So you're getting some fresh data here. What is the case study? The case study is about science funding. So here, why do we think the as-if machine would be useful here? Because the impacts of science funding can feel distant to people, right? In our daily lives, we use a lot of things that are possible because a scientist or a group of scientists made it happen, but we don't really know that. So our idea was using this as-if machine to reduce this distance, make people sort of think about the relevance of science funding to their lives, and change science funding attitudes, hopefully in a way that people want to have higher sort of funding levels for science. Our experiment, so the treatment is where people are using the as-if machine to imagine a day in their lives where they face a medical issue due to reduced funding, they sort of are struggling getting the help that they need. The placebo, this is very sort of common in experimental studies where they use the same system, so they're spending the same amount of time, but they're writing a very different story. So, maybe we had a couple of examples. One of them is that you met your famous celebrity and you're just talking to them. And then the other treatment group is sort of what we think about as the state of the art in this field. So in this field, narrative transportation is generally you give people a story, you make them read the story, and that hopefully changes their mind. So this is basically getting someone to read a vignette, and here people are reading a vignette about a girl being cured of cancer. So you can see that the story is also not personalized to you. Somebody else is benefiting from science. And we measured, as I mentioned before, narrative transportation works by reducing your psychological distance to a thing. So we measured the psychological distance, and we measured people's attitudes towards science funding. We also gathered a lot of information about their demographics, their attitudes across, their attitudes, related to AI and various other things. We also collected a lot of data, obviously, on their system use, like how often did they accepted a autocomplete, how often did they rejected, how much time did they spend, how much did they write, how much do they like, how much they enjoyed using the system, and so on and so forth. So you're going to be using all of these, we're going to be using a technique called causal forest to understand how some of these factors might be playing a role in the degree to which you would be affected by our system. But I'm not going to present that here, but I will present one finding related to something that we expected to play a significant role, and therefore we pre-registered it in our experiment plans, and that is the familiarity with the levels of funding that the person already has in the US. So we expected that to play a role, and therefore we looked at what we call heterogeneity analysis here. So results. Here's the plot. We're looking at the distance index. High level, I will go over this now, but high level, the as-if machine is effectively reducing psychological distance. This is the distance index. The treat is the as-if machine. Vignette is this reading the story, and the placebo is writing about your celebrity crush and meeting them. The measure distance index captures various things. Individuals, how an individual thinks science has benefited them, how cuts to scientific funding could affect them, and whether they think levels of scientific funding is relevant to their lives. So that's what's being captured in this index. Larger Y values indicate a lower distance. So larger Y values are things we want, right? So that means that you think that science funding is relevant to your life. And you can see, again, comparing these, that the as-if machine reduces psychological distance significantly more than the placebo and the current state of the art of how we approach this problem. So that was the psychological distance. How about the attitudes? The attitudes is what we care about, right? Yeah. Attitudes, if you look at attitudes, how do we measure this? Like one of the main questions here is participants are told about the actual current level of funding for the NIH. And because this was sort of health related, we wanted to focus on the NIH and ask what the level should be. And they're given a dial, and you can choose whatever number you want from 0 to 100%. I guess 100% of the federal money seems. Anyway, so that's the question, or at least one of the questions here. And unfortunately, we do not see any significant differences across these groups. So people are finding science to be more relevant to their lives, but it's not necessarily changing how much they think there should be money available for science funding. So attitudes are not shifting. But now let's go to this question that I was saying we pre-registered because we thought it would be important. How do these results vary across individuals as a function of their familiarity, existing familiarity with the levels of funding? So here we didn't fact check people. We just asked them, how much do you know? And we asked them this question in a 7-point scale. So this is the x-axis. Oh, I forgot to change. Sorry, this is our Okay, let's start with this one. So the participants were asked how familiar they are with the levels of science funding in the U.S. That's your x-axis. Larger Y values indicate a stronger effect size compared to the baselines. So this is treatment versus placebo or treatment versus the vignette. And then we have the psychological distance measures, and then we have the attitude measures here as well. So you can see that for both of these measures, people who are already highly familiar are not moving. It's people who are less familiar are the people for whom, for both psychological distance and for attitudes, we see a significant shift. And of course, if you're looking at, let's say, half of our population is saying that their level of familiarity is one or two, so quite low levels of familiarity, which we would imagine maybe our sort of general population. So the effects vary significantly with familiarity. So if you look at now, this was our attitudes data. You were seeing that I was telling already that it's not that we don't see a significant effect on attitude change, but we do see a significant effect for this subgroup of less familiar people. Right? So we don't see an average effect, but we see effects for some populations. And you might, if this is a thing that one, I guess we need to. I'm just generally curious how this as-if machine works across different application areas for people who are more or less familiar. To the degree that we trust this, I'm guessing most people are not very familiar with the levels of funding in the US. So at least there is some silver lining that this might be the group that actually this would be most effective for. Now, limitations and ethical concerns, as I mentioned for the other one, and there are plenty here. One of them is that there are potential psychological harms, right? So you're getting people to imagine that you're going through a sort of medical crisis, and you're not sort of getting the help that you need. So there are some harms associated with this. Obviously, we have IRB. Obviously, we warn people. But important to keep in mind, much like Plurals, there's dual use here as well. We built the system for various purposes, so increasing sort of trust and investment in science, or other applications we're going to be testing are try to increase empathy, to get people to better prepare for long distance sort of risks like climate change, but systems that are again built to persuade can be used to persuade for other purposes as well. So that's important to keep in mind. Again, steering LLMs is a challenge. I will say in this system, as I test this system, I found this is a thing that we need to be sort of working maybe with the dial. I found it harder to get the LLM to change its proposed plan. So as I'm trying to propose something else, it sort of still tries to go back to this story that it's trying to get me to write. Right, so that might be positive, that might be negative, but again, there are limits to LLM steering that might again limit our ability to write, get people engaged in a story in ways that are productive. Because this is an imaginative exercise, I'm less concerned about hallucinations. Right, by design, we're getting people to write about things that did not happen. But again, guardrails need to be placed before this open source project is shared openly, which we haven't done yet. So this would be in our pipeline to do before we release the project fully. And the contributions. So this work is informed by, this time, psychological principles that enhance narrative transportation and mental simulation. The one part of it that I'm most excited about is that there are parts to storytelling, and the agents decompose that to different sort of sub-processes that will allow us, we haven't done these experiments yet, but that will allow us to turn off some aspects to see what about the narrative transportation, what about story writing and reading is playing an important role here. Is it the personalization? Is it the writing? So we'll be able to do some of these tests later on. to better inform the theory itself. And again, unlike past work that does narrative transportation, here our participants are not passive consumers, but they are co-creators. So it's a different way of I guess, looking at narrative transportation. And again, systems-wide contributions. This will again be an open source package with documentation and tutorials. And the goal here is to really build, as opposed to running an experiment, building an engine of experiments that enables future work. And now we show that the as if machine empirically reduced the psychological distance to the effects of scientific funding. Not attitudinal change for an average person, unfortunately, but for individuals who are less familiar with the subject. And we also estimate various other factors, which I skipped in this talk because we just simply don't have as much time for it. So those are the projects that I wanted to cover. I wanted to now give some thanks. First of all, most importantly, to the collaborators, especially Josh, who is one of my PhD students, who his ideas and vision led both of these works. He was the lead author. He should get obviously the lion's share of the credits. We had very skilled master's and undergraduate students that were helping us with the projects, 2 on Plurals and 3 of them that are currently helping us with this as if machine. They have been fantastic, helping us with various technical testing and experimental aspects. My faculty collaborators, Eric, who is a co-advisor for Josh, and Stephanie Preston, who is our UM psychology collaborator for the as if machine project. Funders, Plurals was originally funded by my NSF Career Award, which was then terminated because of its partial focus on misinformation. So I definitely have a very low psychological distance to the effects of scientific funding. So which might say the as if machine will not work for me. That's okay. But the as if machine project is being funded by the Midas Pods grant, which we're very thankful for, and we're hoping to run, as I said, a few other experiments and wrap up the project before the funding is completed this year. And finally, thank you for listening. Okay, so now I can take more questions.
Okay, if you have a question, just put your hand up and I will bring the mic to you.
Thank you for an excellent talk. This was fascinating. I was curious, could you tell me more about the decision to focus on the confidence and knowledge about the amount of scientific funding versus actual knowledge of scientific funding? Yeah, I mean, we had some debates about that. That is, it's more to me. This is an indication less of how much you know, but more about like how much you care and you already have some opinions about this. So people might be misinformed, but if they think that they know the field, they might be sort of less movable. So that's what we were trying to get at here. So we did ask some questions. Should we just still ask at the moment to say like what they think the numbers are, so that we will look at some of this afterwards. But the survey was getting quite long, and because we were like really more interested in this sort of caring and thinking that you know that might affect your movability, we sort of prioritized that question. Yeah, great question.
Thank you, that was great. My question, it sort of caused me to reflect. Jim Dater, who's a futurist, talked about any plausible statement, any useful statement about the future has to be somewhat, well, largely ridiculous. Yeah. And it made me start to think about some of the, and you alluded to this, what are some of the other aspects of how agents might be taking rhetorical stances, or have different moral frames, or sentiment, or different levels of like integrative complexity, how they look at multiple sides of an issue and integrate that into how they approach the deliberative aspects of this. And I wonder your thoughts about how we might think about starting to integrate that into some of this work as well as you move forward?
Yeah, I mean, so unfortunately, I think my first answer here is going to be like a simplistic technologist perspective, which is that, so one thing we are right now doing is that these agents are producing, text based on the instructions that we are giving them, but we are producing a lot of sort of co-writing text, because we have, at this point we have 500 people, but we will have at the end of this like 1,500 people that are producing all of this sort of text and seeing autocompletes and rejecting or accepting them. So this reject accept kind of data we're hoping to use basically to build what we call contextual banded solutions, which is that basically want to learn what kinds of autocompletes are, one, getting people to accept these autocompletes, and two, hopefully leading to positive outcomes. So that's our more like purely data-driven way that we are hoping to get at this. It's just that you need a lot of these examples to be able to build these systems. But you can go at this a different way, which is sort of more playing around with more of these, like how do we incorporate some of these like moral ideas and so forth. I will say again, we have some past work here that at least these generalist systems are not very good at reflecting our deep values. So there's a lot more work to be done in that setup there, which we haven't really started thinking about. Great question, though. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would like to go back to the Plurals paper, which is, you show that there is an advantage of Plurals relative to the zero-shot models. Where are they coming from? So I would like to, whether you could decompose that. I can think of, like more targeted training data. That's. Do you think that, that the agents had exposure to different personas, which are more representative, somehow make their arguments more more sophisticated?
Yeah. So there is eventually I want to do a more sort of robust analysis, like ablation studies of turn off different components of this to see what is the fact, like what is the thing that actually made an effect here. The good and the bad here is that I think we tested a very simple version of Plurals where there was no real structure. So, which is actually the part that I'm a lot more interested about, that is like how these agents are talking to each other, does that really have an effect? So because it's an ensemble, it's really just a list of sort of texts that are produced by different agents that are then summarized by the moderators. So in this case, we had sometimes I'm trying to remember. So in this case, I think it's because we have more intersectional identities. So it's not, again, when you're asking a generalist system, you can't say you are one woman, two men, like this. 5 of you are from here. So you can't really produce that with a or at least in a reasonable prompt. You can't produce that in a sort of generalist zero-shot system. Versus we can have this national representative sample. So again, we have some liberals. You can have you can even have liberals that are Republican Party. Like you can have all kinds of things that actually exist in the world, in the US today, and they actually produce different kinds of text. So if you look at the text, it's a lot more nuanced and real than this sort of more stereotyping version that you get from a generalist model.
So it's a synthesis of multiple perspectives already.
And the perspectives themselves, I think, are more nuanced than you would get if you're creating 50 liberal agents. I don't think you would get this. Okay. It's because they have these different identities that are reflected in the text itself.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was really interesting.
Hi, yeah, thanks for the second talk as well. I really love the motivations behind AIM. I think storytelling is like a really compelling way to build empathy. So I think that's super cool. I'm wondering if like maybe there is like more of a concern around hallucinations in the specific system, because my intuition is that if I hear like a compelling story and I find out some significant facts are not actually true or not what happened, I might be less compelled by the story or feel like that didn't actually happen. So I'm curious, like if you expect like a drop in that like psychological distance gains if users find out something like that.
I mean, I think because we designed it and we tell people that to imagine a future, it's not I guess in the future you might see a thing that is like not correct right now, but because it's imaginative, I'm actually maybe I'm being too sort of easy on ourselves here. I was thinking that because it's an imaginative process, hallucination is not necessarily as big of a problem here. If you were trying to create a story that is like not story like a real life story, then I can see that would be a problem. So that's why it might be like if you have a vignette that is like not realistic, that might be more of an issue. But I'm happy to talk offline if you might have an intuition here that I'm missing. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about psychological distance. I'm having a hard time sort of like wrapping my head around it because there's like a temporal and a spatial component to it.
It can be any one of these. So something can feel distant to you because they are distant in the future. Like it's, like for instance, climate change impacts might feel really distant. Like you believe in it, but it's like in the future. To that, you might have a psychological distance because of temporal. You might have people, things are happening far away from you. You might have more like a spatial distance. You might have people are very different from you, so you don't know how to relate to them. So that would be more like a personal experience related psychological distance. So anything that you really doesn't feel as sort of tangible to you, that it doesn't sound like it's sort of relevant to your life, you can have psychological distance, which is why you can try this across different interventions. So if it's like distance because you're thinking about experience of an out-group member that's very different from you, you might use that to increase empathy. In our case, it was just that it is you might think that scientific funding is not relevant to your life.
Thank you.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, thank you. Just wondering, is it meaningful to compare the two approaches in terms of persuasiveness or something, or what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, you can definitely see, absolutely try to have people come up with some sort of scientific, like make a strong case for scientific funding for someone who doesn't believe in it already, or for different sort of groups. And then that can be our vignette, right? So the vignette is not coming from a lot of in our case, we basically had to look at past work to find what are the kinds of vignettes people are using, so that we can compare to something that was done before. But that would be I guess Plurals is trying to persuade through sort of messaging versus narrative. The AIM system is trying to persuade through stories. So any kind of persuasion task, I guess. They can, to some extent, can be used. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. It was very enlightening. I have been recently interested in ways that we can sort of empirically encode within an agentic AI these human-related skills you've been talking about, like imagination, collaboration, negotiation. And I know that, for your question over there, you talked a lot about how you guys in this example use instructions.
Yeah.
So a very data-driven process. Yeah. And I was wondering if you might be able to shed any light on other approaches that have been used in the field, or any that you guys thought of as well to sort of foster these values or these human-like tendencies in an AI.
I mean, we've tried through examples, because you can imagine also, we all learn through examples. These models learn through examples. So it's this is the reinforcement. They're the way that these systems work, you have a training system, you have a fine-tuning step, and then you have this reinforcement learning through human feedback. So they learn through like whether people like a thing or not. So you can imagine trying to train these systems saying, no, this person prefers this over that. And then those texts might have embedded in them various different sort of values that an individual has. So you're not explicitly telling, here's the value this person has, here's the value this other person has. You're just sort of showing them through examples. So those are another sort of types of approaches that one can use. As I said before, again, depends on what context, but in some contexts, what we're finding is that they learn more superficial things, as opposed to more sort of deeper values that might be embedded in some of these texts. I can't really necessarily say that they work too well. So I think it's all contextual, right? So it's wherever there's sort of more data, they've learned sort of better patterns. But wherever there's not enough data, either it's a different subgroup or a task that has not come done, at least general systems don't work too well. So you can give examples, you can give instructions. What else? I mean, again, you can partly it is you can, as opposed to relying on like a single agent, you can create these sort of multi-agent systems. That's another way that you can try to do that. So those are the few that come to my mind. But really, effectiveness will vary on the in the context. My brains. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, can we have another round of applause for Dr. Budak?